I want to just insert another question in there though about the financing piece. So a recurring theme or a big, selling point for the work that you do is that people can purchase businesses without using their own capital. So I'm assuming, like you mentioned, that you are borrowing money either through like the SBA, the Small Business Association, a bank, or some other, maybe a private lender. But when you say there's no risk outside of your time, can you elaborate on that? Because what if, let's say you borrow 50,000 from the bank, you purchase the coffee stand, the numbers worked out on paper, but let's say over the course of a few years, something happens, it's still a risk, right? I mean, you still have to pay back the loan at the end of the day, regardless of whether or not the business succeeds. Or is my understanding incorrect on that?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what type of deal you're doing. So if you're doing an SBA deal, the SBA does want a buyer's deposit, and it's normally 10%.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the 10%, so let's say for your $100,000 deal for the SBA, if you had $10,000 to put into that deal, then fine. If not, you go partner with somebody that has that money and share the ownership with them. And then the other issue comes down to who's actually borrowing the money. So when you're buying a business, if you're doing an SBA deal, the individual buyer is borrowing the money. So with the SBA, they might have you personally guarantee the money, but then they insure that in the marketplace. And I don't think there's ever been a case of the SBA calling in a personal guarantee. But if you're doing a traditional loan from a bank, they're using the company's credit and the company's assets for credit and security. So it's the business that's borrowing the money, not the individual. So you don't have to personally guarantee that loan in the mass majority of those cases. So worst case scenario, if you bought a business and you gave it your best shot and the business has borrowed the money, not you, and it just hasn't worked out, then the bank or the investor will just take the business off you and they'll deal with it. You'll just get to walk away and get on with the rest of your life. That's why in the US you have things called LLCs, limited liability corporations. So as long as you don't commit fraud, then you're fine. If you were doing fraudulent things or illegal things, then the banks come after you personally. But as long as you're acting properly and the business just whatever hasn't worked, there are some businesses this year that have been impacted massively through COVID-19, and through no fault of their own, they weren't able to pivot their business model, and they've had to give their businesses back to the bank or their lender. They've been able to kind of walk away and get on with the rest of their life. It's painful, but what would be even more painful is if you had to personally sell your house or pay back the rest of that money. The way I teach how this works, you don't have to do that.
That's really interesting. And you're right. That makes total sense, that legal separation because of the LLC between your personal assets and the business assets. Thank you for clarifying that, Carl.